Post-war Christmas is now becoming as big a source of holiday inspiration and sentimentality as the Victorian one. But anyway, all of this got me thinking, is Christmas still evolving? Whenever I posit my Victorian/post-war cultural theory, people often note that our current era is about as far from the post-war era as the post-war era was from the Victorian era, which suggests we might be living on the brink of a cultural age that will prove as transformative as those two. But anyway, even if we accept the premise that we've been sort of dining out on post-war Christmas nostalgia for quite a while now, are there any signs that artists and entertainers and tradition makers more generally have actually added anything substantial to Christmas over, say, the last 20 years or so? I mean, obviously people are trying to add stuff. Every year all sorts of new Christmas TV specials and songs and snacks get released, but making the new Rudolph or candy cane can be a pretty uphill battle. The inherently backwards looking nature of Christmas culture tends to make people pretty skeptical about new stuff, but once in a while, something does break through. And I think you could make the case that a distinct early 21st century Christmas culture is finally starting to take shape. So today, I'm going to tell you a couple of my picks for things that have been added to the American Christmas canon over the last 20 years that I think have proven their staying power to the point where it is not too unrealistic to imagine that they might still be around 6 decades from now. Okay, first let us talk about Christmas movies. The sort of thing your dad forces the entire family to watch on Christmas Eve. What is the most recent, broadly universally recognized as being good Christmas movie released in the 21st century so far? I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's Elf, starring Will Ferrell. Released in 2003 during Ferrell's peak of popularity on Saturday Night Live, Elf was one of the most commercially successful Christmas films ever released up until that point, according to Forbes, and enjoyed mostly positive reviews from critics, and it has only gotten more popular since. IMDb currently ranks it as being one of the top 10 best Christmas movies of all time, and it is also the only post-2000 movie to make the top 10. CBS, the USA Today, IndieWire, Thrillist, Paste, and Time Out, among others, all have it in their lists of the top 10 best Christmas movies as well. And again, it is always among the newest of movies to be included. So what makes it so great? Well, I think that a big part of the appeal of Elf, which tells the story of a human raised among Santa's elves who is forced to come to the real world where hijinks ensue, is that it is an excellent example of a style of content that has really come to define modern American Christmas culture, which is meta Christmas, which is to say Christmas content that is very self-aware and even somewhat mocking and sarcastic towards the Christmas content that came before it. Elf is a film that derives so much of its humor from subverting and satirizing the conventions of other Christmas movies, to the point where I think it would be a hard movie to even fully get unless you've already seen most of the other great films of the American Christmas canon. But in any case, Elf does the meta style so well, and with such a genuine playfulness, that it's kind of set the standard for this type of Christmas thing ever since. It's a film that proves you can be self-aware about Christmas entertainment without being jaded or hostile to the holiday, which I think was a sweet spot that a lot of audiences were looking for in 2003 and ever since. All right, and talking of meta Christmas humor, let me now tell you my nominee for the newest Christmas tradition that I believe has successfully wedged itself into the American Christmas canon over the last 20 years, the wearing of the ugly Christmas sweater. These days, if you Google ugly Christmas sweater, you can find dozens of online retailers selling all manner of sweaters done in this very particular style with garish, clashing colors and awkwardly cliched Christmas imagery. Though these particular shirts are all modern, mass-produced, fast fashion churned out in some Bangladeshi factory somewhere, they're supposed to evoke a style of handmade sweater that reached a kind of cultural peak in America during the 1980s when knitting pattern kits became a very hot item with a particular sort of middle-class housewife. I certainly remember my grandmother constantly buying these pattern sets and asking me what kind of sweater I wanted her to knit for me next. Dinosaur, fireman, Ninja Turtles, Christmas-themed ones in particular became very popular things to give to children of this era for Christmas because The sort of people who made these shirts were not exactly masters of subtlety, as you might have noticed. Anyway, as my generation aged, this style of sweater went from being a subject of childhood resentment to wistful nostalgia. It became a symbol of a simpler time, and that time's unintentionally hilarious aesthetics. My hometown of Vancouver actually takes credit for having the world's first ugly Christmas sweater party back in 2002, hosted by these two aging millennials who have since authored what purports to be the definitive history of the ugly Christmas sweater backstory. In any case, over the last 2 decades or so, widespread generational angst at this very particular cultural object has clearly been powerful enough to make the ironic re-embrace of it one of the most viable and entrenched new traditions of American Christmas. Intentionally buying and wearing an ugly Christmas sweater is now the go-to outfit for December office parties, holiday photo ops, and even clubbing. And again, it all gets back to this idea that a lot of the energy animating the creation of new Christmas traditions these days comes from a place of whimsical self-awareness. The idea that Christmas has always been sort of awkward and weird and corny, so why not just embrace it? It's an attitude you can see in a few other relatively modern Christmas traditions as well, like the televised fireplace log, or some of the more deranged Christmas-themed snacks, like gravy-flavored candy canes or fruitcake-flavored Mountain Dew. Alright, now how about Christmas decorations? If you had to name an object that has become a fairly ubiquitous presence in a lot of American homes around Christmas time, something that wasn't very common 20 years ago, but a lot of families, especially ones with young children, now feel an obligation to buy and display, what would it be? My pick is this thing, the Elf on the Shelf. So Elf on the Shelf was invented in 2005 by this stay-at-home wife of a high school football coach from Georgia, and over the last 17 years, her once modest family business has now sold over 11 million of these kits. $50 this cost at the Bed Bath & Beyond. So let's take a look at how this works. So you get this little dolly and this little story that you're supposed to read with the kids. And basically what you learn is that the doll spies on the children all day and then goes back to the North Pole to tattle to Santa about what he's learned. And then when the elf comes back the next morning, he's in a different part of the house than he was the day before. So it's all very exciting to gullible children who think that this proves that he's alive or whatever. But I shouldn't be so jaded. It is obviously a cute little tradition that a lot of parents have found to be a fun and whimsical way to impose some external discipline on the household during the stressful holiday season. But it's also a great example of a relatively modern Christmas thing that has penetrated the culture quite deeply, given that the wild success of the original kit means that America is now home to Elf on the Shelf Netflix specials and breakfast cereals and parade balloons and board games and Happy Meals and Funko Pops. They even blasted one into outer space, which is one of our weirder rites of passage for demonstrating something to have culturally made it. That said, the thing that I most wonder about when it comes to the future of Elf on the Shelf is whether the whole rigmarole of buying these original kits and doing the whole elf surveillance routine with your kids is going to continue, or whether this elf is just going to evolve into a kind of generic American Christmas stock character. Like, if we take The Grinch, for instance, he has obviously now largely transcended the various Christmas movies that they've made about him, to the point where Grinch movies are now arguably a less important part of American Christmas culture than just the character of the Grinch himself. And so that would probably be my prediction of where Elf on the Shelf will be in like 20 years. A character who will continue to be merchandised up the wazoo and continue to make this lady very rich, even as families gradually lose interest in the $50 Orwellian ritual that started it all. All right, now let us talk about what I think might be the single most stagnant category of Christmas thing: Christmas music. Now, as we all know, pop stars are constantly trying to make the next big Christmas hit, which only makes sense because a lot of the covered to death Christmas songs that we are so familiar with today, like Jingle Bell Rock, Santa Baby, Blue Christmas, or Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, originally got their start as ordinary radio singles by the trendy musicians of the time. But over the decades, audiences have also become pretty savvy to this, to the point where I would say the public is even somewhat instinctively hostile to modern artists who just throw together some Christmas ditty, expecting it to be an overnight sensation, making them millions of dollars in mall soundtrack royalties.